Very good evening to all of you. Sorry for technicalities. Dr. Harjinder Kohli is going to speak on onco-anesthesia and urge to improve the long-term outcome. There was some technical issue on Facebook, so we're going through StreamYard. And I will request Madam to start her presentation. Please, ma'am.
A very good evening to all and greetings from my state of Punjab. I take this opportunity to thank family, the Anesthesia Society and especially Dr. Hetal who gave me a challenge to be a part of this Facebook live sessions. This is amazing platform that facilitates a positive learning environment. This started as a perfect utilization of lockdown period and it continues beyond. Thank you Dr. Hetal and Team TAS. Coming to my presentation, onco-anesthesia and urge to improve the long-term outcomes. I have a disclaimer to make. It is just an endeavor to emphasize that cancer isn't always curable. At least, let's make it endurable. Going by Demi Sanders' version, that every life is important and we will do all we can, not only to help them die peacefully, but to live until they die. I would be taking my discussion through the following headings. Why onco-anesthesia is an emerging subspecialty, rather I should call it a super specialty. How onco-anesthesia is different, why? Because we are dealing with a totally different subgroup of patients here. The strategies that need to be changed in our practice that can help us to have the long-term outcomes. Let's have a holistic approach to deal with these patients and certain critical care issues that need to be addressed. Now, why? Why there is a need to address this problem? Because the burden of cancer is increasing at a rapid pace. WHO predicts 22 million new cancer diagnoses per year globally by 2030, and 60 to 80% of these would require surgery, some several times. Others would need diagnostic, therapeutic, or palliative treatments. Anesthesiologists have an important role in the effective management of this cancer tsunami. And I think we as anesthesiologists have an opportunity to positively influence the oncological outcomes. Surgery leads to various biological perturbations. There are neuroinflammatory, immunomodulatory, altered metabolic pathways, various structural alterations, and also aberrant neuronal signals. So the anesthesia technique that we impart have a susceptibility in this perioperative period for activation of various mediators and micrometastatic disease. There is suppression of cell-mediated immunity, increased pro-angiogenic factors and growth hormones, altered gene transcription activation. So as a result of tissue trauma, various stress responses to surgery, there is immunosuppression through the release of catecholamines, prostaglandins and growth hormones which act via the activation of COX-2 receptors and beta-2 adrenergic receptors. Inflammation at the time of tissue trauma also leads to the release of cytokines, notably interleukin-6 and prostaglandin E2, which have an inhibitory effect on the natural killer cells. These cells are responsible for detecting and destroying the tumor cells. Hypoxia during this period leads to the release of hypoxia-inducing factor, which leads to tissue proliferation and angiogenesis. Also, very perioperative modulators like pain, anxiety, hypothermia, metabolic disturbances, use of various blood products lead to the potentiation of catecholamine release, various inflammatory mediators, suppression of natural killer cells which potentiate colonization and dormant or slow-growing micrometastasis. Now, anesthesia and cancer recurrence. There has been evidence now which shows that there's a concern regarding the potential role of anesthetics and analgesic techniques in causing the cancer recurrence and metastasis. It is ethically actually difficult to perform the surgery without the perioperative pain relief, or trying to do a surgery only under regional anesthesia. Hence, the various clinical trials that have been used, they use a combination of anesthetic drugs, and it is difficult to perform just one drug and show that it has effect on cancer outcome or not. Now this slide again represents a tsunami of surgical insult that occurs. I'll try to simplify it. So during the surgical period, there is a perfect storm of stress-induced immunosuppression. This tumorigenic physiological environment, it invades the immune system and leads to the proliferation and invasion of tissues. So invading and invading of the tissues. So the investigations are basically based on the effects of anesthetics and the clinical use, including the time of exposure and the concentration. This also leads to various changes in the RNA coding. Various predisposing factors are studied during the investigations, which include age, genetic, probably gender, use of opioids, alcohol abuse. All these affect the investigations that are carried out. Also, there are pathological mechanisms, functional and structural alterations, metabolic pathways are altered, there is aberrant neuron signals, and because of the structural changes, there is disruption of the blood-brain barrier. The possible interventions that can have some role in neuroinflammation leads can help us to know how the natural case signals pathways are mediated, whether the oxidative metabolism is also important in this cascade, epigenetic modulation, and the role of activation of cholinergic reflexes. So again, this paper, now when surgery is taken, it is taken with a curative intention. Tumor resection is a risk factor, however, for metastasis. The spread of cells into the circulation can occur in the perioperative period, that is, can any time before, after, or during the procedure. And even if the margins are all clear, they can still lead to micrometastasis, and this needs to be addressed. Now, the various perioperative concerns. This is how these patients are different, and we have to change our method of evaluating these patients. So various coexisting factors, like these patients are already on some kind of a chemotherapy or radiotherapy. Various patient factors that have to be kept constantly in mind is a difficult airway. So assessment, evaluation, and planning. There also always has to be a plan B, a difficult IVSS, and a constant fear of pain in the mind of these patients, which needs to be taken care of. Optimal perioperative care requires individual assessment of the impact of cancer and the treatment of the functional reserve of all the major organs. Nutritional assessment is very important, and addressing to the various comorbid conditions. Pain, as I have said, that it is present in 25% of the newly diagnosed and 75% of the advanced malignancies. Psychological distress and depression accounts in 70% of these patients. Malnutrition is also to be addressed. Also, cardiac, pulmonary, renal, hematological functions need to be assessed. Dyselectrolytemia is a constant problem in these patients. Also, they have neutropenia as a result of myelosuppression, and which needs to be taken care of, as this can lead to iatrogenic infections. Psychological support is very important, and yes, the financial issues, they also need to be taken care of. So this is a common thing that we come across: a difficult airway, procuring the difficult IVSS, malnutrition, moribund patients, restricted to bed, prolonged immobilization, and yes, the psychological support and depression needs to be taken care of. Nutritional assessment in oncology is very important and a must. That is the malnutrition universal screening tool. So for the global assessment of these patients, nutritional assessment and intervention is important. We should all be familiar with these things. The use of difficult airway needs a planning, and use of fiber optic intubation in difficult airways anticipated. CMAC, the role of ultrasound cannot be underestimated. Critical care issues with vascular lines and blocks, even airway assessment is done with the help of ultrasound. This is just to complete the list how the commonly used chemotherapeutic agents have toxicities on various organ systems, and how in the perioperative period we are concerned about these and need to alter the drug dosage and management for these patients. So all these things have to be addressed in the perioperative period. So cancer surgery, now we have enough evidence to show that anesthesia influences the outcome. So we definitely need to make certain strategies which can help us to improve the outcome in these patients. So what needs to be changed? Inhalational versus TIVA. Inhalational agents, both in vivo and in vitro studies have suggested that there are contrasting effects of inhalational agents. They promote tumorigenic potentials. The time of exposure and concentration have an impact on the ischemic preconditioning. There's a reduction in the natural killer cells, cytotoxic T lymphocytes, and there's alteration in the ratio of T helper 1 to T helper 2 cells. Interleukins are produced will lead to immunosuppression. Both the systemic reviews and the meta-analysis of retrospective observational clinical studies have suggested that the traditional inhalational anesthetics are associated with a decrease in both the disease-free survival and overall survival when we compare it to TIVA. There is little evidence to support that nitrous oxide causes tumor recurrence. TIVA confers definite benefit. Propofol preserves the immune response to the tumor cells during surgery. It enhances the T lymphocyte activity, inhibits COX-2, it decreases the surgical stress and lessens immunosuppression. It has both anti-inflammatory and antioxidative effects. There is disruption in the upregulation of hypoxic-inducing factors, which reduces the migration and the invasion of the cancer cells. So when we compare TIVA with inhalational, we have seen that when we use TIVA, it is associated with improved recurrence-free survival compared with volatile anesthetics. But however, there is some kind of heterogeneity that exists. It is because of the extent of the surgery, the patient factors, the type of cancer that we are dealing with. So there are much evidences now to say that a combination of TIVA with regional is better than inhalational anesthesia. Thiopentone and ketamine, they both suppress natural killer cells. Thiopentane, in addition, decreases the neutrophil chemotaxis. Etomidate, it abolishes the stress response by inhibiting the basal cortisol production. Benzodiazepines have a immunomodulatory role, which is mediated through the central nervous system. Midazolam definitely reduces the cytokine release due to stress. Further, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents, they reduce the malignant potential of the residual cells. They act by the inhibition of COX-1 and COX-2 receptors. Prostaglandin production is decreased. As a result of this, there is downregulation of interleukins and upregulation of tumor necrosis factor and natural killer cells. There is enough evidence of benefits in cancers of breast, bladder, cervical, ovarian, and colorectal malignancies. Beta blockers, they inhibit catecholamine-mediated processes, limit the tumor cell invasion, angiogenesis, lymphangiogenesis, and epithelial to mesenchymal. It lowers the interleukins. Alpha-2 adrenoreceptor antagonist, they play an important part as a multimodal opioid sparing effect. Dexmedetomidine in low doses for sedation and clonidine have been studied to have a positive influence on oncosurgical patients. Though limited studies, but they do halt recurrence. Statins have been now a new modality which prevents the effect on tumor metastasis. Glucocorticoids, they have anti-inflammatory adjuvant therapy to pain, they prevent nausea and vomiting. Dexamethasone is a common agent used for this, but the immunosuppressive effects caused by them are of concern. Both innate and cell-mediated immunity is blunted by the use of glucocorticoids. They decreased both the number and the activity of natural killer cells. Transmission-related modulation. This is another entity for tumor progression and metastasis. Stored blood and old erythrocytes are implicated in this. So they decrease the T helper cells and there are chances of recurrence due to immunosuppression. Glucose-depleted blood is what we can use if need be. We also need to prevent intraoperative hypoxia, hypotension, hypoperfusion, hypothermia, and hypoglycemia. Postoperative pain management is of utmost importance. Multimodal analgesia is advocated because fear of pain, as I told, is most important and it needs to be addressed at regular intervals. Regional anesthesia and local anesthetics. Neuroendocrine and metabolic stress is blocked. They have a suppressive effect on the immune response. The need of opioids and volatile anesthetics is reduced with regional anesthesia, and they also decrease the cancer and surgery related pain. It has been shown that in patients where paravertebral block has been used for breast cancer patients, along with propofol, they do much better than those patients in whom general anesthesia with inhalationals is given. Intravenous lignocaine, it has an analgesic adjuvant effect along with the GA for opioid sparing, and it also has anti-inflammatory effects. Whereas guidelines have a strong recommendation of using IV lignocaine to enhance the recovery after elective, especially colorectal surgeries, and it has a wide therapeutic margin and appears to be safe for extended duration of 24 to 48 hours. Opioids, high doses of fentanyl, 20 to more than 20 micrograms per kg, and morphine that suppresses natural killer cell activity for 24 to 48 hours. They also interact with the inflammatory cytokines and tumor necrosis factor acting via the mu opioid receptors. There is a role of MOR receptors. The activation of these and overexpression of MOR has been shown to have a low survival in cancer patients and has been advocated in the recurrence. So, opioid-induced homeostasis disruption is there. That's why we advocate the use of multimodal analgesia to address to this problem. Morphine also stimulates mast cell activation. It increases the concentration of substance P and cytokines. Now, there have been some evidence-based recommendations for use of opioids in oncoanesthesia. Yes, opioids are immunomodulatory. They do decrease the NK cell activity, but still the studies are not there to demonstrate this effect in the human studies. Safety of opioids is there, and various studies in the perioperative period and in the treatment of chronic pain management has shown that there is not much adverse outcome. When used in pediatrics, there is no adverse developmental, behavior, or cognitive effects. Complex opioid tumor interactions have been there, but not well established. So actually, there is no substantial evidence against the opioids in the causation of tumor recurrence, spread, and metastasis, and there is no need that the patient should be deprived of the beneficial effects when and how the rescue analgesia is required in these patients, even though there is global opioid epidemic crisis. So, all in all, surgical stress leads to immunosuppression, inflammatory mediators are released, and the growth factors are released. Our anesthetic agents have both anti-carcinogenic effects mediated by regional anesthesia, local anesthetic agents, propofol comprising of TIVA, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents. On the other hand, we have seen that inhalation agents and opioids are pro-carcinogenic in nature. This almost summarizes the same. The various factors which lead to cancer progression and the effect of various anesthetic agents at what level they are acting to promote the outcome. So now there is sufficient evidence to suggest that use of specific anesthetic agents may affect cancer recurrence, but perioperative period is also associated with multiple factors that influence the tumor cells. Stress, inflammation, perioperative medication all have a role to play. There are benefits of regional versus general anesthesia. Volatile anesthetics have a pro-inflammatory effect, immunosuppression, and they upregulate the hypoxic-inducing factors. Propofol, as we have learned, they have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. Lidocaine has a protective effect, and still there are conflicting and inconsistent evidence with regard to the use of opioids. Coming to certain new modalities, hyperthermic intraperitoneal chemotherapy. It is a promising therapeutic option for peritoneal carcinomatosis, and along with the cytoreductive surgery, it has been shown to improve the outcome and the quality of life. Intraoperative radiation therapy. A concentrated dose of the radiation is delivered to the tumor bed and at tissues which are at risk of microscopic spread, especially during the operative procedures. Cytoreductive surgery and hyperemic intraperitoneal chemotherapy. Paul Sugarbaker said, it is what the surgeon doesn't see that kills the patient. So present indications are gastric, colorectal, ovarian cancers with peritoneal metastasis, peritoneal mesotheliomas, pseudopyxoma peritonei. It is regarded as an end-stage disease which is amenable to palliation and systemic chemotherapy. So in this, the plasma peritoneal barrier is breached. It targets microscopic disease that cannot be completely eradicated by surgery. Chemotherapeutic agents are heated at a temperature of 42 degrees Celsius, instilled into the abdominal cavity for about 90 minutes. Localized, high peritoneal concentrations of the drug is reached with limited systemic absorption and hence causing less toxicity. Effect of intraperitoneal chemotherapy on tumor cells is enhanced because there is no adhesion formation where they act. Numerous pathophysiological changes are encountered during this, as it is an extensive surgical procedure. It mandates proper planning for the pain-free period. It requires aggressive hemodynamic monitoring, airway pressure monitoring, cardiac output monitoring at times in sick patients, urinary output, core temperature monitoring, and serial ABGs. Cisplatin and mitomycin are the commonly used intraperitoneal drugs. A small word of how it actually works. So this is an electronic machine which warms up the chemotherapeutic agents at a set temperature, and the roller, it instills the drug into the abdominal cavity through the inflow catheter and it returns to the warmer by the outflow catheter. There are numerous concerns during the HIPEC which needs to be addressed. Perioperative period, again, the physical status of the patient requires addressal because there is hypoxemia because of ascites, pleural effusion or ascites, cardiotoxicity because of previous chemotherapy, major surgery is there, and pain. Intraoperatively, we have to see how we can replenish the oxygen reserve. We have to be careful regarding the temperature fluctuation. Blood loss can be major sometimes and the fluid shifts are massive. Sometimes there can be chemotherapy-induced toxicity which needs to be addressed. Postoperatively, temperature control, ventilation and analgesia part has to be seen. Intraoperative radiation therapy. As I told, a concentrated dose of radiation is delivered to the tissue bed and the tissues which are at risk of microscopic spread during the operative procedure. Now, what is our rationale? Now, there is a chance that we can reduce the residual disease at the site of surgery to maximize the radiobiological effects of a single high dose of radiation, and we can optimize the timing, that is, combine the surgery with the radiotherapy. It also has a therapeutic benefit. The local tissue tumor and the tolerance of the adjacent healthy tissues and organs can be judged. Certain ethical concerns and dilemmas. For a palliative intervention, ensure that no harm is done to the patient. The patient has a right to refuse the treatment, but once he gives a consent that he is to undergo the procedure, then the physician's prerogative is there that he has to comply with the accepted standards of care. For example, suppose a patient has hypotension after spinal anesthesia for any reason. If he wants to be started on noradrenaline, the patient has to accept it. He cannot refuse it. So the standard of care has to be maintained if the patient gives a consent. Clear communications, including the direct personal interactions, is very important. Pain management is ever challenging. It includes reassurance, patient-controlled analgesia, regional blocks, multimodal analgesia, which comprises of opioid rotation, ketamine, clonidine, paracetamol, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents. Gabapentin has a good role. Some points to ponder. Various challenges have been there. Complex surgical procedures, concomitant radiotherapy, chemotherapy, various comorbidities. So TIVA with propofol, regional anesthesia, cyclooxygenase antagonists, safer than the volatile agents and systemic opioids. Intraoperative hypoxia, hypotension, hypothermia, hypoglycemia, and blood transfusion are implicated in cancer recurrence. Ultrasound and multi-detector CT scan with virtual 3D bronchogenic image reconstruction is a useful tool wherever we find that the airway is difficult. Cytoreductive surgery with HIPEC, keeping into mind its inherent complications, need to be dynamically assessed and managed. Palliative care is an integral part which improves the quality of life. Management of behavioral, psychological, and pharmacological aspects is also important. So we got to minimize the biological perturbations, reduce the surgical stress, which is not enhanced, persistent postoperative pain to be managed, prevent hyperalgesia, transmission-related immunomodulation, hypothermia-related deleterious effects. Pre-warming is all important. All of us know that hypothermia leads to a cascade of other deleterious effects on the various organ systems. Malnutrition has to be taken care of. Pre-rehabilitation and integrated pain management programs, implementation of evidence-based medication, and outcome-driven perioperative plans, post-operative surveillance, so that the patient can rescue from the surgery and its complications. We have to ensure that these patients remain on track to complete their cancer journey with the adjuvant therapies. Goals of anesthesia: rehabilitation is very important, which comprises of 4 components: medical optimization, physical exercise, nutrition, and psychological support. So optimum perioperative care of these cancer patients requires assessment of the impact of the disease and improve the functional reserve of the major organ systems of an individual. Multimodal, interdisciplinary approach, palliative care, rehabilitation is very important to attain timely return to intentional oncological therapy. This is an indicator. This is a quality indicator of how our plan to execute the things is successful. Enhanced recovery after surgery using a multidimensional approach is important. But what about return to intentional oncosurgical treatment? It is an endpoint. It's a reliable surrogate which helps us to see how these patients will be able to live a free and overall a better quality of life. It is a continuum of the care, and a comprehensive approach to the patient care can influence the oncological outcomes. So all of us together can make a real difference in the outcome. Thank you very much. We cannot direct the wind, but we can always adjust the sails. Together we can all do it.
Hello. Thank you very much, madam. It was an excellent presentation. I would like to ask you a question. You rightly said that ERAS protocol, prevention, reducing the usage of inhalation agent, reducing the use of opioids will improve the outcome of the patient. So what is the protocol in your institute? Suppose patient come for breast surgery. So how do you prepare the patient? How do you anesthetize the patient? And how do you take care of post-operative pain, ma'am?
Yeah. Most of these patients in the preoperative assessment are told about the pain. They have been told that some kind of a regional anesthesia would be used. Most of the patients are so deliberated, they sometimes don't agree for the perivertebral blocks. But then we try to make them very comfortable. A few of them do come out and we give them perivertebral blocks. After, obviously, we give some kind of a sedation so that they are comfortable. As I told, the fear of pain is important to be addressed. So they even shudder at the sight of the needles, and then we try to make them comfortable, give some kind of a sedation, and go with the perivertebral blocks. If they don't agree, then we use TIVA, use propofol infusions, and we are giving now opioid sparing. I cannot say totally we avoid the opioids, we do give, but along with that we give dexmedetomidine inhibitions, and also we try to give as much as possible, and we keep following these patients up to have their feedbacks and improve ourselves every time.
Do you use Zylocard infusion?
Zylocard infusion, we are using with paracetamol, Zylocard, and magnesium sulfate infusion is being used in our setups. And every 8 hourly we repeat these.
Okay, madam. And regarding ERAS protocol, do you follow those things like giving preoperative carbohydrate and some other protocols of ERAS?
Yes, ERAS, we allow these patients to have some 200 ml of juices or clear fluids early in the morning at 6 a.m. Avoid as far as possible rice tube if we can avoid. Give them a good post-operative pain. Keep them good hydration, and I think most of the patients do good. Actually, it is the communication with the patients, preparing them. Most of them are already debilitated with the disease, so most of them are compliant with what you say, and they do. This all helps us actually. The continuous communication, following them up regularly. This also helps us to improve every time.
Thank you very much, madam. So we end the discussion with this. Thank you all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for patience hearing, and it was an immense pleasure to be a part of this challenge. Thank you, the team, and Dr. Hetal in specific.
Thank you.